Alright, so now you know how to work with buttons and to run some code when that button is clicked. We're going to allow the user to enter some data, and then we're going to get that data in our code and do something with it. In this case, display it in the logs. So we'll start by adding in our text field. So as we saw before, we can have various different types of text field, which will bring up different keyboards depending on the type of text that we're expecting in that text field, but I'll just go for a plain text. So drag that in. I'm going to center it again and put it, let's go for slap bang in the middle of the screen. And you can see by default it's pretty narrow, which isn't going to be great for the user entering much data, and that's because we've set the default width is set to wrap content, and because it's a text field it doesn't have any content yet. So let's change the width to fill parent, and now it all looks good. There is one property that I'd like to show you for text fields that's pretty useful, and that's the hint just here. And that's where we can do something like maybe use the text enter your name, and then let's see how that interacts. You can see it displays as a hint for the user, but the great thing is when the user taps on the text field, then that enter your name text will disappear and they'll be able to just enter their name. They won't have to manually delete the text which is already there, which would be a pretty bad user experience. So let's just start typing, and you can see that text disappears. And actually if we get rid of that, then the hint comes back again. So that's working well. As you can see, however, on my particular device here, the center of the screen is where the button is. So that's a warning to you that a layout that can look perfectly good on the simulator won't necessarily look good on the user's device. So let's change our text field so that it's actually aligned beneath the button. And we can do that just by dragging it around, and so now it's aligned below the button rather than behind the button or centered, and you can see that that now looks a lot better. Great. So now what we want to do is when the button is pressed, rather than just saying button pressed in the logs, it also gives us the content of whatever the user has entered there. And that will allow us to do all sorts of powerful things like asking for a username and a password, asking for some content to post a tweet or send an email, or anything that you might do to type into your phone. So just before we write that code, we're going to need to give the text field an ID. So I got that just by double clicking on it. So double click on the text field, and you can see it's already got a default ID of edit text, which is the official name for a text field within Android development. I'm going to call it my text field, just to get something a little bit unique in there, but you can call it whatever you like, as long as it has an ID and that's saved. Great. So now, within our click function code, we need to get the contents of that text field. And we do that by essentially creating a variable that represents that text field and allows us to get the contents from it. So as you noticed a moment ago, the text field is of a type of edit text. So we're going to create an edit text variable using Alt-Enter again to add the edit text class. And just like we created a view with a capital V here, we're creating an edit text with a capital E at the beginning there. And I'm going to call it my text field. The variable I used here doesn't have to be the same as the one that I used for the ID, but it kind of makes sense to keep those matching up. And then we're going to set this equal to, and now we want to find that text field. So we use find view by ID. I just pressed enter there to use the auto predict to get that method. So find view by ID, and then R for resources dot ID to get a list of all of the IDs, and then I called it my text field. So that then will search through all the IDs and find the one with an ID of my text field. So we're almost there, but you can see we've got an error. And that's because this find view by ID finds a view. But we don't want a view, we want an edit text. So we have to convert this view into an edit text. And we do that by putting edit text in brackets before our find view by ID command. So let's just summarize what's going on there again. We're creating an edit text variable using that first command there, and it's called my text field. And then we're using the find view by ID method to find our view, to find our text field, and we're finding it by its ID using resources or r.id and then the ID that we set, which was my text field. And then finally, we're converting that from a view to an edit text by putting edit text in parentheses before the command. Phew. So there was quite a lot there. As always, we're diving quite deep quite quickly here. So feel free to go back and listen to that explanation again. But at the same time, also don't worry too much if everything's not completely clear. We will be looking at this and Java in general in much more detail in the next section. So I'm now going to change the log command to log.i, and I'll leave it as info. But this time I want to get the contents of the edit text of the text field. So instead of having that string saying button pressed, I'm going to use my text field dot, and then I want to get the text from that text field. So I use the command get text. And last of all, I want to convert that to a string so that I can display it in the logs. A string is just a collection of characters, just like info or the button pressed that we had before. So that's it. We're now creating a variable to link to our edit text using find view by ID, and then we're logging under the info tag my text field, get text, and to string. So we're accessing the text field, we're getting the text, and we're converting it to a string. Phew. Let's give it a go. So now I'll put my name in there. I can either use the keyboard or type with the software keyboard, which is very handy. And then I'm going to click the button, and there we go. That's what we're after. So we've got info and Rob. And if I wanted to only see that result, I could just look for info in the search box there. There we go. So we're getting closer and closer to true interactivity here. We can now get some information from the user rather than just letting them press a button. Okay, time for you to do something now though. And the app that I want you to create looks like this. So it's pretty simple. It's essentially a login page for our app. So it asks for a username and a password. Notice the password has a password type, meaning that it displays dots rather than the letters themselves. And then when you click login, the username and password will be displayed in the logs. So that's what we're going for. Whole new app. Best of luck. Go for it. All right, I hope that went well. Here we go then. I'm going to start a new project. So file, new project, and this is going to be text field demo. Again, those will all be the defaults. and we'll start with an empty activity and leave the activity names as the defaults. So as a reminder, our aim here is to have two edit texts, two text fields, one for a username and one for a password. And then when we press the button, both the username and the password will be displayed in the logs. So here we go. I'm going to start by going to activity main.xml. Now you may have seen this message before. Usually it just means that your project is still starting up, still being created. So there we go. It now looks great. I'm going to start by creating my text field. So I'm going to get rid of my hello world message. And then we'll have a plain text, which I'll just move a little down from the top. And I'll change the width to fill parent. And I'll give it a hint of username. And I'll give it an ID of username edit text, because that's exactly what it is. Okay, now I'm going to add a password, and bonus marks if you did this. We'll set the password to have a type of password. And the width again will fill the parent. We'll change the hint to password. And we'll change the ID to password edit text. And I'm going to capitalize the E this time because now it's the second word in the ID name. Great. Okay, now we just need a button. I'm going to drag that in underneath. And I'll change the text to login. There we go. And I'm going to just click run so that I can run it more quickly later. And then while that's compiling, I'm going to write my code in main activity. Right, so hopefully you're reasonably comfortable with this now. We're going to write our code in the main activity class, but not in the onCreate method. And we're going to create a public void, and I'm going to call it login clicked. And as I type that, I think I remember that I didn't actually add an on click to the button, which obviously is very important. So I'll select the button and then go down and add in login clicked as the on click. Okay. And login clicked, of course, is called by a view, that is the button. So we'll create a view to represent that, not that we actually use it. Then I'll use Alt-Enter to add the view class code. Now I need to get the content of my username and password edit texts. So let's create an edit text using edit text with a capital E to represent my username edit text. And then we're going to use find view by ID again. And we're going to look in resources .ids and then I call it something like username edit text. There it is. So always use the auto prediction there. Otherwise, there's a good chance that you'll select one or mistype the ID or something, and everything will go horribly wrong. And of course, this returns a view. I want it to be an edit text. So I put edit text with a capital E in front of it in parentheses. Excellent. So now we've got our username edit text. Now we just need our password edit text. So this time I know I'm going to need to turn it into an edit text, so I'll add that in first, and then find view by ID, and I want resources.id.password edit text. Super. So now I've got those two edit texts. I just need to display their values in the logs. So let's use log.i, Alt Enter again to add the log class to the import section up here. You can see we've now got logs, we've got the view, and we've got edit text as well. So I'll use username as the tag this time. And then to get the contents of the username, I use username edit text dot get text dot toString, and then a semicolon. And then exactly the same thing for the password. But this time we're going to use password edit text dot get text dot toString. And that's it. Let's see it in action. So now we should find that when we click the login button, we see the username and password that the user has entered in the logs. So here we go. I'll just use Rob as my username and password as my password. And you can see that that comes up in dots because we selected the password edit text type. All right, then click login, and there we go. Just as desired. Username Rob, password, password. Excellent. So we're very nearly there now. We've got 2 of the 3 crucial steps to true interaction. We can run some code using a button press, and we can get some data from the user using edit texts. The last piece of the puzzle is to display some data to the user, which we're going to do with something called a toast in the next video. See you there.